President Biden appealing to swing voters after repeatedly taking on his predecessor, as he called it, in his State of the Union address. Biden also responding to a debate challenge from former President Trump. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao, who is in Philadelphia for the president's campaign event. Good evening, Iris. So what is Biden doing to amplify his message from last evening?
Good evening to you, Steve. So President Biden is trying to maintain steam here by hitting the campaign trail. He's traveling to 8 battleground states, starting with stops this week alone and right here in Pennsylvania, then tomorrow in Georgia, then New Hampshire, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And in the speech to be starting very soon right here in Philadelphia, Biden is expected to continue his attacks on Trump, whom he invoked over a dozen times last night in his State of the Union address, though without calling his name. Here's a part of it. Watch.
I will not demonize immigrants saying they are poison in the blood of our country. Now other people my age see it differently. The American story of resentment, revenge, and retribution.
Former President Trump on Friday again called Biden's State of the Union address angry, also criticizing Biden for taking over 40 minutes to make the first mention of the topic of border. Meanwhile, Biden Today he gave neither a yes or no answer to a Trump call for a one-on-one debate with him, saying it depends on Trump's behavior. And Biden also said this regarding backlash right now from some progressives in his party over him using the term illegal to describe the migrant who killed a Georgia student. Watch.
Do you regret using the word illegal to describe immigrants last night, sir?
Well, I don't regret it. Technically not supposed to be here.
And Steve, we are hearing from some Biden supporters here at this event that last night's speech by Biden did give them more confidence in the president and that they're looking forward to hearing him more tonight. Meanwhile, we are also seeing polls showing President Biden either tied or trailing behind Trump in key battleground states, and that's amid Biden's new push for campaign blitz. Back to you, Steve.
So, Iris, it does appear that, a lot of the reviews coming in last night that the president's energy level was high. He delivered it well, according to many accounts. Tell us a little bit about what you have behind you at that venue. It sounds like it's hustling and bustling there.
Right, actually, it's a pretty packed room. We just heard basically his surrogates introducing him, also previewing his theme of the speech tonight, which is also a choice between democracy and autocracy, same theme that he was mentioning in his speech last night. But honestly speaking, having covered the campaign trail for the past few months, this room is much smaller than a room for or a venue for a Trump rally, which is about, we could say, maybe 10 times in the room of this size. So it's a difference in the room size, but the crowd here does seem pretty excited. As I told you, people were telling us that they are very excited to hear from the president tonight, Steve.
And to these Iris Tao painting the picture on scene there. We appreciate that report, Iris. Thank you. And President Biden's State of the Union address has provoked very different reaction from lawmakers. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has more on what representatives from each party had to say.
Last night's State of the Union address was one of only 2 State of the Union speeches not delivered on the months of January and February in the last 30 years. Similarly, it has been decades since a sitting president delivered a State of the Union address during an election year, with the opposing party having virtually already decided on a presidential candidate. For Congresswoman Maria Elvira Salazar, the Republican from Florida, this year's State of the Union address had a completely different tone than in previous years.
It was a political speech, and you don't do political speeches when you are talking to the nation. You're explaining to the nation what you did during your 4 years. Basically, what Biden was doing is just trying to do a campaign speech, trying to convince the voters that everything is good.
The Congresswoman also highlighted her discomfort at the president's criticism of the Supreme Court during his State of the Union address.
In this country, you do not criticize the Supreme Court, because that's in the Constitution, and that is one of the branches that assures that we have the fantastic system that we have. So don't mess with the Supreme Court.
Congressman Michael Bast, the Republican from Illinois, admitted he left the State of the Union early.
I don't have to sit there and watch the garbage, and it really was a campaign speech.
House Democrats had a completely different reaction to the president's speech. Democratic Congressman Steny Hoyer applauded the president's foreign policy focus, something Republicans decried.
Look, I think the president is doing exactly the right thing. He said that Israel needs to defeat Hamas. Hamas has been terrorizing Israel for a long period of time.
House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries praised the president's immigration plan during today's press conference, but unlike the president, refused to mention the name Laken Riley, the 22-year-old nursing student murdered in Georgia by an illegal immigrant.
Comprehensive vision for fixing our broken immigration system and addressing the challenges at the border. He also acknowledged the horrific nature of the murder, and of course emphasized the need more generally to keep our communities safe.
After last night's speech, President Biden hit the campaign trail and is expected to visit 8 battleground states within the next month. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Martinez, NTD News.
And President Biden continued to tout his accomplishments during the State of the Union address last night, while taking jabs at his predecessor, as he called it, former President Trump. How do we understand this message? We sat down and spoke with senior advisor to President Trump, Kash Patel, to assess. Kash Patel, thank you so much for joining.
Hey, Steve, it's great to be back on the program.
Great to have you, Kash. The president last night, starting his State of the Union address, comparing the time we live in to Roosevelt's presidency back in 1941, attacking Trump and Trump supporters, accusing them of being a threat to democracy, comparing them to a threat at home to Putin invading Ukraine. Roosevelt, however, talked about 4 freedoms in his speech, with freedom of speech being one of them, freedom of worship at the top. You travel across the country, Kash. Tell us about the types of Americans that you encounter that support President Trump.
Well, the state of our union from our commander-in-chief is supposed to be the state of our union, not the state of the Ukraine. And I'm not knocking efforts to help the Ukrainian citizens who need it, but the state of our union should be an effort by our commander-in-chief to say, this is how America is doing. This is where we need to do better as a government, and this is how we were going to do it. So instead of quoting Roosevelt, he may have done better to take a page out of the 4 instances that Roosevelt let out on, faith being one of them, and freedom of speech. And I think what Donald Trump is doing is exposing the corruption that has infiltrated not just the mainstream media and corrupted freedom of speech with the big tech platforms who have chosen to censor currently and in the future many voices about conservative America. I think Donald Trump is the one that's going out there and saying it's okay to have free speech. It's okay to worship. And not only is it okay, Americans want it every single day in their lives. And Joe Biden, based on last night's speech, wants the government to take those away.
Kash, he talked about January 6th, calling it an insurrection. This is part of his theme of threats to democracy, which is supposed to be, one of the top 1 or 2 issues on the Democrat platform heading into this election. What was January 6th to you? Was it ultimately an insurrection?
To me, absolutely not. And my opinion is irrelevant. This Department of Justice under Merrick Garland chose not to charge Donald Trump with any crimes of insurrection when they could have done so, because they themselves know, even in their corrupt 2-tier system of justice, that they could not get to a case of insurrection because Donald Trump came nowhere close to doing it. Donald Trump was the only one, as president, who authorized the security of the Capitol in and around January 6th, only to be shut down by Bowser and Pelosi and other political operatives.
Kash, he also talked about his policy of being made in America products. He also said that Trump did not do anything substantial when it came to China. What policies did Trump put in place to benefit American workers and subsequently penalize China, if any?
Donald Trump made it a priority to help our farmers and our farming industry by choosing to buy their products versus going overseas. And when it came to China, There was no president in U.S. history that was harder on the CCP. He exponentially raised tariffs against all imports and exports coming out of China unless they got in line and stopped manipulating their currency, for one. He also sanctioned Chinese officials who participated in illicit schemes to steal seed intelligence, farming secrets from the United States of America, and put those people behind bars. So when Joe Biden says Donald Trump did little or nothing against the CCP, you know he's lying, because that's all he's got left to do.
Cash, some have called Biden's speech last night more of a campaign speech, invoking Trump roughly 13 times, not directly, but by calling him his predecessor. How do you think moderate voters, which are going to ultimately likely decide this next election, will perceive his speech given the tone, tenor, and substance?
You know, moderate voters want to be welcomed into an organization, a group, a movement. That's what wins elections. And last night's speech by Joe Biden wasn't inviting anyone into his tent. It was declaring essentially a full-on bare-knuckle boxing match. He chose to go on the attack against Donald Trump and alienate 80+ million Americans to, when he could have had the opportunity to go after the vote in the middle and say, hey, welcome to our movement. Instead, he chose to commit a historical tragedy and take on the United States Supreme Court in a State of the Union speech in a very vicious manner. And that is just very unprecedented.
Kash Patel, as always, really appreciate your perspective. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.
The Republican National Committee has a new person in charge. Trump-endorsed candidate Michael Whatley has been elected as the new chairman, taking over for Ronna McDaniel, who's come under much criticism for underperforming in the midterms as of late. The committee also appointed Trump's daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, as the co-chair.
I would like to thank President Trump for his trust and support. There is no one who has been more focused on fighting for the American people, and I am grateful for the opportunity to work with him to win and help revitalize our great nation.
We have one goal. The goal on November 5th is to win, and as my father-in-law says, big league. We're going to win on November 5th.
The decision follows Trump's strong performance in the Super Tuesday primaries and the withdrawal of GOP primary contender Nikki Haley. Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.